Bravo, and this is From the South. Today we begin in Argentina, where thousands of protesters are marching in Buenos Aires, hours after the summit of G20 leaders began. That demonstration was called by trade unions, feminists, environmentalists, and other groups to protest against the neoliberal policies of the G20 and the International Monetary Fund. It comes at the end of a week-long Alternative People Summit, which says it also wants to put forward a positive agenda for change. Our correspondent Edgardo Esteban is with the protesters in Buenos Aires.
The protest has begun here on the streets of Buenos Aires against the G20 Summit. Social movements, worker unions, and political parties, but also delegations from around the world, are here to say no to this summit for the most powerful countries and also to condemn the International Monetary Fund. There is a huge security operation which has cut off the city of Buenos Aires, with no buses, trains, or metro running. Even the highways leading into the capital have been closed, all in an attempt to stop this demonstration, which, in spite of all that, has seen a massive turnout. The demonstrators are heading to Argentina's Congress, where the organizers will read a document opposing the summit, but also opposing the negotiations between the Macri government and the IMF.
Now, the G20 Summit is meant to be focusing on issues like development, infrastructure, and investment. But those issues have been overshadowed by a series of contentious matters, from the US-China trade dispute to the conflict over Ukraine. Another issue which is expected to be raised at the G20 is the killing of Jamal Khashoggi and the situation in Yemen, as Saudi Arabia's crown prince is received by world leaders. And much of Argentina's capital has been transformed into an armored city. Security was ramped up as the city braced for dozens of anti-G20 protests. 22,000 police and security officials have been deployed. These measures are expected to remain in place until Saturday. And to further discuss the G20 Summit and the counter-protest by social organizations, we are being joined live by Rubén Guillemi, a journalist for La Nación newspaper. Hello, Rubén. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, the G20 is supposed to express harmony, but we've already seen Trump cancel a meeting with Putin and Macron hold what was called a firm exchange with Mohammed bin Salman. Is this summit showing disunity more than anything else?
Oh, I think there are three kinds of issues around this summit. The first group of issues would be the short-term questions, those that are in the newspapers' headlines. I mean, the problem between Ukraine and Russia, the crisis with Saudi Arabia after the assassination of Jamal Khashoggi, or Trump, for instance, being investigated about Russia collusion. I mean, these are serious problems, but there are short-term questions that maybe nobody will remember next year. And the second group is the long-term issues, among them the trade agreement between Canada and United States, or the trade agreement between China and United States. And then, it's just then, the third group is the one that all the protesters are against are the transcendental issues, among them the climate change, the losses of jobs because of globalization. The problem is that always short-term issues, those that are in the newspapers, affect long-term issues and generally eternally delay transcendental issues. And that's the reason why so many people is protesting in Buenos Aires streets.
Now, Ruben, you were mentioning a counter-summit and demonstrations have been going on since Monday. Can you tell us a little bit more about what the protesters are doing and what they hope to achieve?
The protesters, they are against the neoliberal policies that many of these countries are applying, and of course the main issue is the globalization and the losses of jobs in all our in many of our countries. So this is the biggest problem. And of course, these leaders don't care about climate change. Climate change is a huge issue, and United Nations Secretary General Guterres says this is a big catastrophe, and nobody cares here about that because of these short-term questions that are the main issue here, and the long-term questions that are maybe more important, but these transcendental questions, nobody cares about them. They will not be included probably in the final agreement. So that's the reason why thousands of protesters are in our streets.
Now, Ruben, one last question for you. Buenos Aires has effectively been shut down by security personnel. Does Macri anticipate a repetition of the images we saw in Germany last year?
Mm-hmm. Sorry, I had a problem with. Yep.
Okay, I will repeat the question once again. Yep. Do you think Macri anticipates a repetition of the images we saw in Germany last year?
Sure. I don't think now. There's also a geographical reason. It's not that easy to come to Buenos Aires. We are very far from many other places, and Germany was closer just because of geographical reasons. I don't think that that many protesters will be here. Of course, there are many local people protesting every day in Argentina. We don't need G20 to have people in the streets protesting, but. I cannot guess, but I don't think that will be as huge as these protests were in Germany last year.
Ruben, thank you so much for your time for Telesur. We hope to speak to you again in the future. We have been speaking with Ruben Guillemi. He is a journalist for La Nación newspaper in Argentina. More news now. The leaders of the BRICS countries got together during the G20 Summit. The BRICS group is made up of 5 major emerging economies: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. During the meeting, Russian President Vladimir Putin spoke about the need for cooperation between nations and warned of the dangers of isolationism.
Thanks to clear cooperation of the 5 governments, our strategic partnership has become even stronger and continues to evolve in various directions. It is important that the countries of the association increase coordination with the framework of international organizations and forums. In general, it is impossible not to see that unfair competition is increasingly replacing honest, equal, and intergovernmental dialogue. The vicious practice of using illegal unilateral sanctions, protectionist measures bypassing the UN Charter, World Trade Organization rules, and other generally accepted rules of law is being extended. All this has a very negative effect on the atmosphere of cooperation in the international arena. This leads to a collapse of business ties, to a loss of trust between participants in economic relations, breaking the very fabric in the global economy. BRICS countries should continue to work actively together in favor of creating a fair and equitable system of international relations.
And earlier, the Mexican and U.S. presidents, as well as the Canadian Prime Minister, signed a new free trade agreement in Argentina. This new USMCA agreement replaced the long-standing NAFTA, which Trump heavily criticized. The Canadian Prime Minister described this latest deal as a new modern agreement, while Trump said it will lift the risk of serious economic uncertainty. Peña Nieto, who is serving his final day in office, thanked the incoming administration for helping fix the deal. We move on to Honduras, where the Supreme Court has given a guilty verdict for 7 of the 8 accused of murdering indigenous leader Berta Cáceres. This decision did not satisfy her family.
As announced by the family of Berta Cáceres and their lawyers, some criminals involved have been convicted, but not all of those involved in the assassination have been brought to justice.
The other 7 accused are also responsible. They are the authors of Berta Cáceres' murder, just as the victims and private accusations claim.
Following the guilty verdict, Cáceres' family noted that the judicial process went on far too long, and that showed the justice system's bias, as the perpetrators are still not on trial.
We feel powerless because they haven't started an investigation against them. They haven't even given an order to start any judicial process.
We're going to keep pushing. The Constitution and our rights mean we can keep pursuing justice, not just for us, but for all the Honduran people.
Nearly 3 years have passed since the murder of Berta Cáceres, and after the police initially tried to portray her as a criminal, what's been achieved so far is thanks to the perseverance of her family and support from the international community.
As I've said, it's very hard for me, but we fought, and we've had the whole world on our side. The press has played a vital role.
For Berta Cáceres' family, the sentencing of Honduran energy firm employees means that the guilt of executives and owners is clear.
From the start, almost 3 years ago, it was clear that Berta Cáceres' murder was planned by executives at DESA to the effect that she would be executed by hitmen linked to the armed forces.
Vinculadas a las Fuerzas Armadas de Honduras.
Lawyers will now ask the company still operating in the region to leave indigenous territory. In the next hearing, individual sentences will be handed down for the 7 convicted. Meanwhile, Berta Cáceres' family has vowed to keep pushing for justice to be served.
Colombian Senator Gustavo Petro has said that accusations against him were made only to distract from the Odebrecht case involving the country's Attorney General Néstor Martínez. Petro was accused earlier this week of corruption during a congressional debate in which a video was presented, showing him receiving 20 million pesos. The senator denied the accusations, saying the money he received was used as a loan for his political campaign. The Supreme Court will investigate the accusations. Our correspondent in Colombia, Tatiana Portella, tells us more about the video scandal surrounding the senator.
The video shows Senator Gustavo Petro allegedly receiving illicit funds. However, the senator says architect Simón Vélez gave him those 20 billion pesos to fund an electoral campaign for his senatorial candidacy. In a statement, though, architect Vélez has denied giving any money at all to Petro. But a 2016 interview published in Colombian media states that Vélez not only gave money to Petro, but also to the vice president Herman Vergas Lleras, who was in office during Juan Manuel Santos' presidency. Also, the daughter of Juan Carlos Montes, the man who is seen in the video giving the money to Senator Petro, says the architect Vélez did give the money to the senator through their father. The video was released in the Senate during a debate on attorney Néstor Humberto Martínez's alleged involvement in the Odebrecht corruption scandal. The Colombian Supreme Court asked the president to have an ad hoc prosecutor to investigate the scandal.
We thank Tatiana for that report. At least 2 people have died and 12 are injured after a small plane crashed in a residential area of Sao Paulo, Brazil. Emergency services are at the crash site, and a spokesman has said it is not yet clear if more passengers were on board. 7 of the injured were hit by wreckage from the plane, and 5 were inside their homes when it hit their houses. The flight was due to land in the nearby city of Jundiaí, but crashed shortly after taking off. We'll be back very soon. Stay with us.
Acompañamos a los pueblos que resisten en cada una de sus luchas.
Somos esa ventana que se abre para visibilizarlos entre fronteras.
Thursdays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. Moving on to Mexico, more than 700 Central American migrants have been transferred to a new shelter in Tijuana after heavy rains covered the old one in mud. The Benito Juárez Sports Center was inundated, leaving large puddles inside the outdoor facility. Despite this, some people decided to stay in the shelter, which is currently running at double capacity. The new shelter is a location which isn't close to the border.
The clothes, all blankets, we no longer have to change.
Well, a little bad because we were not prepared for the rain, only with sheets, but the wind lifts them up.
Our correspondent Alina Duarte is with the migrants in Tijuana.
About 6,000 migrants had arrived at this shelter here, but last night they began to be moved. That's because the heavy rain here in Tijuana has essentially wrecked the shelter. Behind me you can see some of the people who, those who decided to stay outside the shelter. But some of them, out of despair over the conditions here, have decided to embark on a hunger strike. These include men and women, they're the mothers who find themselves in a really extreme situation. They've already been away from home for 2 months with their children, now dealing with the rain, and they're still waiting. So we've seen these people fetching their belongings and blankets from the rivers, and in spite of various illnesses, maybe say about half of them are suffering, they are above all very afraid of being separated and possibly even deported. About 200 migrants have already been deported, but the Immigration Authority has promised to deport 500 after they tried to cross the border last Sunday. It's because of this fear and uncertainty that they don't want to be moved. Most persons who did move last night are those who are traveling on their own. You see, most of the families who have already traveled more than 4,000 kilometers have decided to stay here. In the middle of all this water and these deplorable conditions, they're also worried that the little aid they're receiving, the food, and the other basic necessities will no longer be brought here, and so they will have to move in order to receive these things. Tijuana is, of course, a border city with a lot of crime and inundated with violence. This area here in the north of the city is itself a dangerous neighborhood. But the place where the new shelter is, where some of them were taken last night, is even more violent, a neighborhood where nobody goes out after dark. So that is a very difficult situation which these 6,000 migrants are now facing here in Tijuana.
We thank Alina for that report. And the Mexican President-elect Andrés Manuel López Obrador has proposed an investment of $20 billion into the migrant situation as part of the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement.
We're investing more than $20 billion for the development of the North and the South, and in order for people to stay in their communities and places of origin, so that migration is optional, not mandatory.
And staying in Mexico, the forced disappearance of 43 students in Ayotzinapa became the biggest unresolved case of President Enrique Peña Nieto's administration. After 4 years, the investigations headed by the Attorney General could not respond to demands for truth and justice for the students' family members.
In September 2014, outrage exploded across Mexico when news of the forced disappearance of 43 rural school students in Ayotzinapa surfaced. Millions called for justice. The students disappeared at the hands of the Iguala police. For months, the streets were flooded by people who raised their voices to demand action from President Enrique Peña Nieto.
We are here in solidarity with the students and their families. We have had enough of them killing our people. Public workers are here to serve the people, and if they do not serve their people, they should resign, including the president.
5 months after the students' disappearance, the Attorney General made conclusions about the case.
The students were imprisoned, murdered, incinerated, and thrown into the San Juan River. Those are the real facts.
It didn't convince anyone. The victims' family members and human rights activists called in a group of independent anthropology and forensic experts who condemned irregularities in the investigation, accusing the government of obstructing their work.
The GIEI has concluded that it has not seen a single piece of evidence to change its September 6th conclusion, which is that the 43 students were not incinerated in the Cocula garbage dump site.
The attitude of collaboration changed, and the investigation was unnecessarily delayed or directly obstructed.
President Enrique Peña Nieto failed to keep his promise to resolve the case. In one of his annual reports, he suggested the victims' families and all Mexicans overcome the pain.
I am convinced that this moment, this tragic and painful chapter in the history of Mexico, can't be allowed to trap us. We need to overcome this.
But justice for the people responsible for this atrocious act was never done. Family members of the students of Ayotzinapa have marched every month in the capital city, demanding that the government answer one simple question: where are our children?
The Mexican government believed that we would buy their lies and stop demanding justice. But they are wrong, because they took our children away. We as mothers can't abandon them. We as mothers have to keep looking for them.
More than 140 people have been detained for their alleged participation in the students' forced disappearance, but no charges have been brought. Some have even been released after being tortured by authorities.
¿Dónde están? ¿Dónde están? Nuestros hijos, ¿dónde están?
The case of the 43 Ayotzinapa students is just one of the thousands waiting to be resolved. According to official figures, 37,000 people have disappeared, and there could be more, as only 2 out of every 10 missing people are reported to authorities.
Massive public sector layoffs are taking place in Chile, despite strikes this week being called off following negotiations. Up until now, more than 2,500 public workers have been sent home, and that number is expected to rise.
We're here with public workers from the Ministry of Women and Gender Equality. We're denouncing the massive, arbitrary and illegal layoffs which are happening across state institutions, but in particular in this department, where the majority of those dismissed are women. This is happening just days after we sat down with the government and reached an agreement that contract renewals would be a top priority. It's evident that they're violating that deal.
Despite the fact that the government's tax reforms are soon set to become a law, workers in Costa Rica plan to continue their national strike indefinitely. Our correspondent Fernando Francia has more.
The general strike has gone on for 82 days, despite the fact that proposed tax reforms have an open path to approval after the Constitutional Court ruled in the government's favour. Nevertheless, workers are still striking, in particular workers in the education sector, who are yet to reach an agreement with the Minister for Education to end strike action. Even though the school year is nearing its end, the Education Ministry has announced that principals who don't show up for work will be replaced, which unions took as a threat, consolidating their plans for an indefinite strike.
That was Fernando Francia from Costa Rica. More news now, and not even the rain could dampen spirits at Barbados' 52nd Independence Day celebrations. As is tradition, the military army came out in full force to launch the proceedings. Kensington Oval was packed to capacity as people from all walks of life came out to join Prime Minister Motley's first Independence Day celebration. The island's Governor-General Sandra Mason led the proceedings. This is the first time in the island's history that both of its most senior offices, Governor-General and Prime Minister, are held by women at the same time.
The March for a Modern Barbados started in the post-1930s, particularly after our unfortunate event that saw our people have to uprise in order to be able to secure their rights. We are conscious today, therefore, that as we celebrate independence, we do so not simply in recognition of the 30th of November 1966, but in recognition of decades of struggle by those who had faith in our country and who believed that the best could always be possible.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. A Dallas County grand jury in the U.S. has indicted the fired police officer, Amber Geiger, on a murder charge for the shooting of Bob Hamjan, whom she killed in his own apartment in September. According to court records, the grand jury delivered the indictment after considering the evidence against Geiger on Monday and Wednesday. She was initially arrested on a manslaughter charge 3 days after the shooting took place. A powerful earthquake has struck near Anchorage, Alaska, triggering tsunami warnings. Social media videos and images showed collapsed roads, among other damage to the infrastructure. The 7-magnitude quake rocked buildings, prompting people to run out and seek cover. The tsunami warning is in effect for southern Alaska coastal areas and part of the Kenai Peninsula. Residents have also been urged to seek higher ground. There were no initial reports of serious injuries. The World Health Organization has declared the Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of the Congo as the second worst outbreak in history. So far, the outbreak has claimed more than 200 lives in the eastern part of the country. The response has been complicated by ongoing conflict in the region, where more than 50 armed groups made it difficult for health workers to operate. 32 children were among roughly 100 Rohingya people detained at sea en route to Malaysia. All on board were forced to return to Myanmar. The 3 vessels carrying the fleeing Rohingya have since been seized and returned to Myanmar. This is the 3rd time that Rohingya from displacement camps have attempted to reach Malaysia by boat since the monsoon season ended in late October. Now let's take a look at other stories making headlines around the world.
Police in Belgium have used tear gas and water cannons to disperse hundreds of protesters in central Brussels, who were complaining about the high cost of living and fuel prices. The protesters brought central Brussels to a standstill as they blocked roads and chanted anti-government slogans.
I have a salary similar to that of many of us Yellow Vest protesters. We are overtaxed at all levels. Those taxes that are disguised and subtle, and the government does nothing. All the government does is create more taxes. They live outside reality. They don't know what the price of bread is. They don't even know what it's like to pay their bills themselves. And the people, the Yellow Vest, we are saying that we are fed up.
A court in Japan has extended the detention of former Nissan chairman Carlos Ghosn for another 10 days. Ghosn was arrested on November 19th after an internal investigation alleged the chairman and another board member had been underreporting compensation to securities regulators for many years. Thousands of students in Australia have boycotted classes to protest against government policies on the environment. Primary and secondary students rallied in state capitals and rural areas across the country, in defiance of Prime Minister Scott Morrison, who earlier said kids should stay in the classroom.
If we don't stop temperatures going over 2 degrees, we won't have the Great Barrier Reef. Antarctica will melt, and there will be no such thing as polar bears. My life will be so much more complicated than my parents' life because of one simple thing: climate change.
And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, find them on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.
Sentí el latido del corazón.